There we are. All right. Well, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody that may be joining us here today. Thank you so much for tuning in to another installment of the hashtag Together at Home series from Buffet Crampon USA. If you're joining in for the first time, my name is Declan Lynch, and I am the low brass product specialist here at Buffet Crampon USA. And as you can clearly see, I am not alone for this week's episode. I am joined by my good friend and tuba player with the Dallas Brass, Paul Carlson. Welcome, Paul. Thanks so much for being here, man.
Thanks for having me.
We're really excited to hop into things. But before we just start, want to give a quick reminder to everybody tuning in. This is a weekly series that we bring to you every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time here on the Buffet Crampon New York Showroom Facebook page. So please be sure to check out any of our past episodes that we have with some of our other fantastic artists. And next week will be a very exciting episode as my good friend and colleague and my current producer, Matt Vance, will be joined by Paula Corley, who is the a clarinet teacher down in Texas, and we're very excited to have her on next week. And I've actually heard from a little birdie that there will be a very cool giveaway during next week's episode with Paula. So make sure you tune into that to be able to be included in possibly getting some free cool stuff. So make sure you tune in on that. So again, thank you all for everybody to tuning in. So Paul, let's start it off. Thanks again for joining us here today. So I like to start every episode off with our guests talking about, what they've been up to during the quarantine. So the whole Together at Home webcast series started with us being stuck at home and trying to find a way for us to interact with everybody. So what have you been able to do at home during this quarantine?
It's been a wild ride, honestly. I mean, it was, of course, a shock. I literally got off a tour with Dallas Brass. We were driving to our last concert from the airport and listening to NPR talk for over an hour about this weird virus that was just crazy and all this and all the ramifications. And at the time, I thought almost nothing of it. This is, very, very early March. And the next day we played our concert and then we flew home after that. And there were noticeably more masks at the airport on the way home than there were the first, when we were flying, and no one even knew about it, but it was fascinating to be flying through some airports with, all of this. And I came home and the university shut down later that week and to transition to online learning. And the rest of that semester was great, but it was intense. My students really stepped up and did a great job of learning new technologies and adapting. And we finished the school year strong. And then it's suddenly been a weird summer because there's a lot of time. So I've gotten to do a lot of what I call leisurely practice. So instead of like, man, I've got a half an hour to get my chops together and do some fundamentals work before I play and teach all day, or okay, I've got to do this before that. It's like, well, I've got all day to work on really whatever I want. So there's days where I do a lot of solo rep. There's days I do a lot of orchestral rep. There's days I will just do hours and hours of fundamentals. And really it's a privilege to get an opportunity to do these kinds of different practice without being in the pressure cooker of like, oh my gosh, this is what I have to play this week. And maybe I should look at what I'm going to play next week, which has kind of been the go-to, I think, for any working professional, whether you're in an orchestra or freelancing, but even a lot of, by the time I'm in Dallas Brass and my faculty quintet and various performances on campuses and things I'm working on with my students, there's always a laundry list of things we've got to have ready. And having time to just play tuba has been really nice, and kind of take a second and be like, well, what do I want to do with this instrument? What do I want to do with the future of my playing? And it's a great opportunity, I think, for all of us artists to kind of reevaluate our goals and kind of look at the big picture. And when we're able to come back to performing, how we're going to make a big impact and really accomplish everything we want.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, heading into the school year is a lot of emails and kind of new protocols all the time. So it's going to be fine. But I'm looking forward to, my university is going to do in-person lessons, but my studio classes will be online. And You know, not necessarily going to be all day every day in the office like I would in a normal semester.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's good to hear that there's still some positivity through all of the craziness that we've been through. And a quick reminder to everybody tuning in, as we go throughout the interview, that we'll definitely have some time for questions. So please, if there's anything you want to ask Paul specifically, put it in the Facebook chat, and we'll be sure to have him answer your questions and kind of go into detail with some of those things. So really quick, tuning in is our Southeast Division Manager, Donnie Todd. Thank you, Paul, for joining us, and hello from the Highlands of South Carolina. So, hey, Donnie, thanks for joining in. Hope you enjoy the rest of the interview. So, diving straight into it, you have many different tubas around you.
I do.
You have been.
If you're going to be quarantined, do it with a lot of tubas.
I couldn't say it better myself. So you have been with the Dallas Brass for how long?
Well, it felt a weird end of the season, but I guess I finished my 10th year in the group. So
wow.
I joined 10 years ago now. So, well, yeah.
Congratulations. That's fantastic. And in those 10 years, so how many of those instruments have you used within the group?
Good question. I've got 3 different tubas over here, all of which have been my tubas with Dallas Brass. You know, I joined the group while I was still a doctoral student at Indiana University, and like any graduate tuba student, you've got 2 tubas. You've got your large orchestral C tuba, and then you've got a E flat or F tuba. I had a PT-16, which I was fortunate. I was studying with Dan Parentoni at Indiana University. This is the exact same model he was playing on, so it was really cool to study with him on this tuba because it has the 2 valves over here. So you've got a 6-valve tuba, which, people are always kind of shopping and comparing F tubas, and I love the 6-valve F tuba. To me, it just gives so many options. And people complain about a lot of low range on the F tuba, and having an extra valve gives so many more alternate fingering, so many more combinations with the valves that it makes playing a lot easier. I played this tuba for 3 years in Dallas Brass, and it was a lot of fun. Actually, my horn colleague Juan Barrios, this was his favorite tuba to play with. He's always telling me I need to bring this tuba back. Of course, being an F tuba, and this has the 16.5-inch bell. It's a little more focused sound, a little more bright sound. I played some jazz bass in high school jazz band and et cetera. And I think of this as kind of my Fender jazz bass. It kind of has a little growl, a little sizzle to the sound. It's a little bright. It's got a lot of color. So it's a great solo instrument. You see these in a lot of orchestra. A lot of orchestral players have done well at auditions and competitions with these because they're a wonderful way to get that bright German F tuba sound. Also, so it was a great tuba for 3 years. But as people may or may not know, Dallas Brass is one of the few brass quintets that always has a drummer. So we're full 5 brass quintet in the brass quintet, and then also 6 as our drummer. So I'm always playing a lot of bassline things or things that even when we're doing classical rep and he's doing a more percussion part and I'm playing tuba, it's nice to have a little more oomph, a little more broad sound. And I took a lesson with Sam Palafian, and we were talking about different equipment, which led me to the next tuba with Dallas Brass, which was the Meinl Weston 2145.
There we go.
This was I'm dating myself, but this was a very popular model in the 90s. I mean,
yes,
in the 90s, this was just a go-to thing. This tuba was originally designed by Sam Palafian, had a huge influence on designing it. And, the aspects of the lead pipe going straight in, kind of a short lead pipe, get a lot of response, a lot of color. I've had brass. I love playing this in the group because suddenly a C tuba with a little more depth to the sound, a little more of the darker color that fit in with the group a little better. Sam talked about it. It's kind of the bass analogy, the C tuba kind of being an upright, a double bass kind of sound. So you get this like warm, rich feeling for the rest of the ensemble that it's just a really solid foundation. And you know, a lot of brass fans and brass players come to our concerts with Dallas Brass, and I got the most unsolicited compliments that I sounded like Sam when I was playing with this tuba, which is always nice to hear that I could be a shadow of Sam Palafian on a couple nights of the year, you know. But,
something that most of us are trying to be.
Yeah, but this tuba, and you can kind of see on the screen, it's a compact C tuba, which was also awesome for traveling because I honestly traveled with this in an MTS case and a basketball in the bell, and it was wonderful because it weighed 52 pounds, which they always kind of let me have a pass on paying oversized or overweight for it. So it was also a wonderful travel tuba. And for the tuba nerds out there, or actually just people who are interested in music business, the interesting thing to me is when I bought this tuba, the idea was, I first bought, this was one of my first tubas, not this particular one, but my first tube ever I bought was a Meinl Weston 2145 when I was a junior in high school. Wow. And I sold it to buy my PT6 for my bighorn later, but I loved this model so much I came back and bought another one to play in Dallas Brass. But back in the day, the 4/4 C tuba was all the tuba that most professionals ever needed. It really was designed as an all-around instrument, and there's still a number of working professionals across the world that just have a great 4/4 C tuba, and you can do anything on it. I've actually played, because I was playing this tuba on the road so much, I even started doing, a couple times I would do whole recitals on this instrument because I was playing it. You know, if I'm on the road with this tuba 100, 125 days a year, which we were a number of the years that I was playing this tuba in the group, it's just your voice. It's what you're using. It's your daily tool. So I would even start playing a lot of F tuba repertoire and playing that in recitals, and a 4/4 C tuba can really handle it. You start getting into some F tuba rep on a PT6 or a Mr. PC, and they're wonderful large tubas, but it's a little tougher to pull down some of that really fast stuff in these little licks and things. But this was a wonderful all-around instrument. But being a C tuba, it was trickier to play some solo rep, and so that was something I was thinking about a lot. Is it would be great to have a tuba on tour that I loved with the 16 was that I had a tuba on tour that I could also just come off the road and play a solo recital right away, whether it be at Grand Valley or as a guest artist somewhere. It was sometimes people would ask me to do a guest artist thing, and I'd be like, well, I'm going to get off the road, and then I need at least 2 weeks to just get back into F tuba playing, because that's a different animal, and to prepare a recital that I'm not going to have a tuba with me for that recital on the road was tricky. So I thought, what would be something that would be kind of in between? And I'd kind of thought about learning E-flat tuba for a while, and actually Sam Palafian had suggested, E-flat might be a great fit for the group. So I got a Besson 983, which sadly I have not polished up as well as I would have. I left the polish. My polish equipment is in my studio at school, and I don't go into campus as often as I used to. But you can see again a very compact tuba, but this can really put on a lot of sound. And I was talking to a professional that recommended I checked out this model, and he's like, you can go into the back of almost any orchestra, and this will put out plenty of sound for the whole brass section. And I've used it in. I don't know if I played it with Grand Rapids Symphony, but some of the regional orchestras in the area, if it's a pop show or something, this is fine. And the trombone section's always like, man, that horn puts out a lot of sound, which is always nice to hear. And it was funny to me when two things about this instrument that really stood out to me in the early days of me playing it were that I took it to my first Dallas Brass tour, and I'm pretty nervous because I'm learning an entire Dallas brass repertoire with completely new fingerings is not exactly the smartest thing to do. It takes a lot of work, and people may or may not know that our show is mostly memorized. So we keep it, I'd say 60 to 90% memorized at any given time. So memorizing these tunes and playing through them with a whole new set of fingerings was challenging, but it was also an interesting thing to learn how to do. It's the first rehearsal day of the season, and I feel terrible. My brain is going 100 miles an hour trying to keep up with the fingerings. I feel like I'm missing every other note. I mean, I'm still learning the tuba, so some of the pitches aren't right where I want them to be. And we get to our first break, and one of our trumpet players comes up and goes, "Man, that tuba is so much better. It's so much better on this one." And I was like, I thought he was joking, because I was having such a tough time adapting to the new key and the new instrument, and he was like, "No, I'm serious. It sounds." And then by the end of the day, everyone in the group's like, "That's the one. You found it." And I'm like, "Okay." And that kind of blew me away, which kind of, it is true. The playability of these tubas is wonderful. You put in a mouthpiece and you play, which is really great. And the other thing for me was, I was subbing with a Dixieland band thing, and this tuba, it was so easy to take a solo on. As far as improvising, for me, I think E-flat tuba is just, if I'm playing things by ear, or playing a jazz improvisation or something, for whatever reason, for me, years and years and years and studying F tuba at the highest levels, and then picking up an E-flat, and it just kind of comes out. So it's, you can't lose. But these are kind of the tubas my tuba evolution, if you will, through Dallas Brass, and each of them was, I guess I did 3 years with the F tuba and 3 years with the C tuba, and I've just finished my 4th year of playing the E-flat. And and the E-flat tuba kind of is kind of that, the best of both worlds. It's a great color. It's a little brighter color. It's obviously a shorter bugle for the instrument, because it's higher pitched than the C tuba. So being a little shorter, it's got a little of that zip still, and a little slightly bigger bell really helps me play with the drums. Just a little more flair there, gives that extra oomph. So.
So how is that? So being that you are both a frequent performer with DB and also a professor at GVSU, how has the evolution from horn to horn impacted what your teaching schedule? There's a lot of kids that'll grow up with in their university specifically, where their teacher may be playing a C or an F or whatever tuba, and they may not be playing the same key at all. Or even get anywhere close to it. So what is that? Has that evolution had much impact on teaching?
As I've kind of gone through my own equipment journey, if you will, and it's wonderful to always learn more about it. And being a college professor changed the way I approach equipment, because if I'm going to a conference or Midwest or TMEA or something, one of these big things where I'm going to try a bunch of things, there's trying things out for me, which I always was doing, but I'm really shopping more for my students now than anything else. And students have different strengths and weaknesses, and equipment can help that. So, that's something. When I have a student, a number of my students have bought B&S instruments, and I love the evenness up and down. That's something that's always appealed to me about that. But I still have, I'm playing more E-flat tuba lately, the last 4 years, I guess, but I still have some students with F tubas, and I talk to them. I say, look, for me, this is what I've been doing, and I've played a number of orchestral F tuba pieces on my E-flat tuba, and it works wonderfully. I've done some section playing with some different people, and they were like, "Oh, your F tuba sounds great." I'm like, "This is actually an E-flat," and they're like, "No way!" But how you sound is so much in your head and your identity as a musician. So, it's made me a little more open to possibilities. It's also made me more aware of different things. And, most of my students are music ed students, but they're buying 4/4 or 5/4 C tubas. which again are just wonderful all-around instruments. And then I've had one student buy an E flat tuba, but most of them are still picking F tuba for their bass instrument. And that's what I did when I was that age. And I think it was great. I don't know if I could have learned E flat tuba earlier, I don't know if I would have, because I learned so much coming up through the way I did. So. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's funny. There's there in my situation, you study with Dan Parentoni, who is, of all the people in the world to think of when you think of F tuba, that's one of the first guys that's going to come up, especially being one of the minds behind all of these fantastic BNS F tubas. And the first horn I ever got for my bass tuba was an E flat, and learning the F tuba has been my new spot of joy through all of this. It's been like a new experience for me. So it's really cool, and I encourage a lot of people to try and find the differences. E flat is so looked over a lot of times in the U.S. Just because the F tuba is so popular. So it's really awesome to see somebody still out there leading the charge and holding the flag for the E flat.
And it really comes down, I think, so much of our tuba talks are about playing in orchestra, and as it probably should be. There's a lot of work playing in orchestra, but as I play with orchestras. I'm a member of a regional orchestra. It's definitely a huge part of my teaching, playing identity as a tuba player. But there's also chamber music. There's solos. There's freelancing in different things. There's playing in jazz groups. I've loved playing in Dixieland groups the last couple of years, which I've started way back when I was in high school doing that. But there's so many things to do with our instruments that if orchestra playing is not the only thing that you're going to do, you should maybe consider what's going to help all of your things. And one of my former students has kept an active tuba quartet going, and there's days he loves his F tuba, and there's days he's like, so maybe I should try your E flat, so it's really and I've talked with Canadian Brass is doing a chat with David Federley earlier, which I'll watch later, but I was talking to Federley once, and really when you're going to be a professional or an amateur or anything, you've got to think about what tool do you want to make what you want to make. And that is a really important thing. And I've talked with some other buffet group artists too. It's like when you're going into work or you're stepping on stage, what do you want to have with you that's going to help you make your job easier and help you do your job better? Mm-hmm. And and it might change at different points in your life. Sometimes this is more comfortable, sometimes something else is better, and something else gets developed, or you discover, I grew up just not into E flat tuba that much. And some of the recordings and some of the things I heard E flat tuba when I was younger was just kind of, not really what I'm into. The British guys sounded amazing, but then some others I was like, I don't know, if I'm not British, maybe I can't do it, But as I've gotten older and learned more and tried new things, it's suddenly like, oh, this is, and the tubas that I'm using now, the E flat tuba helps me with what I'm doing now more than it would have helped me when I was predominantly playing F tuba. Mm-hmm. The F tuba was wonderful when I was playing that stuff. So.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And so earlier in the chat, you mentioned you were on the road, what, 120 days a year, you said?
Yeah, it's changed season to season. We've and that's partly the evolution of Dallas Brass, the entertainment industry, and a number of things. But my very first season in Dallas Brass, I think we were on the road. It was 168 or 170 days over a 10-month period.
Wow.
And so our season started September 1st and finished in late May, and we were gone all the time. And it was crazy because it was a lot of concerts in there. I remember we did a 24-day tour of Texas that November, from November 1st to November 24th, and we played 19 concerts. So when you take out the fly to tour, fly home from tour. You got 22 days and 19 concerts. And Texas is a big state, so we did an awful lot of driving that tour also. It was a lot of one-nighters. It was an intense season. And we've had some intense seasons since then where it's just, you know, a lot of playing and a lot of, you know, sometimes tough schedules, but sometimes a little easier schedules. But yeah.
So go ahead. What has it been like to balance both the teaching schedule with such a heavy tour schedule some years?
Well, I've got to say, the 170-day tour, I was not teaching at Grand Valley yet, and that would have been too much. When I did start at Grand Valley, which I finished I'm going into my 9th year of teaching at Grand Valley, and my position was kind of a half-time. I'm tenure track now, but the first 5 years of that were kind of a half-time, and that was in a lot of ways a good situation because my department chair in university gave me a little bit of a longer leash to go out and do some playing, obviously with Dallas Brass and et cetera. But by the time I was teaching, we were down to maybe 100 days a year or on tour or so. And really that's still very busy. Yeah. So in a lot of ways, but in a way, it's a funny thing, you know, if you're busy, you can get a lot done. And if you're not busy, sometimes nothing happens. Well, you know, that old saying, if you want something done, ask someone who's busy. Yes. You know, some people who are constantly doing things, adding one more thing, they just kind of get that done also. So it was a lot of really intense years that I'm thankful for, but I would be on the road, and as soon as I got off tour, I was back at school teaching all day. And, you know, it meant some 8 or 9, 10-hour teaching days for me every once in a while, if that's what I needed to do. But also, even in the early teens, when I was doing this, using technology is so much better than it used to be. Having students record things and send them to me was great. I might finish a concert, end up at be back at the hotel and listen to tuba etudes for a half hour and write comments back. And it's the middle of the night, but they'll have them when they wake up, and then they're going full speed ahead. So especially my motivated students, I don't think they lost anything. And when I was back, because I was either on tour or teaching, I was often teaching extra lessons, which was kind of fun, because it was basically, when I was in town, it was tuba camp. It's like tuba euphonium camp. Here we go. We're playing all day, every day. And then when I was away, it was like, here are all the things that you need to be working on while I'm gone. So it's undergraduate study is a interesting time, and in some ways a lesson every single week is almost too much. It's almost, you can almost skate by with kind of, oh, I did a little bit this week and a little bit this week. If I'm going to be like, well, I'm out of town and I'll see you in 10 days, man, that next lesson, you got to have a lot of things ready to go. Yeah. And that's something my students have kind of learned, because I'm not on campus. It's great when I'm on campus, but it's also great when I go away for a week and they need to really take care of business, because they know what I'm going to expect when I come back.
Yeah. That's awesome. And really quick, for all of everybody chiming in, we have our Midwest Division Manager Ben Myers chiming in saying, "Hey Paul, hope you're doing well." Nathan Hayes, "Hey Dr. Paul, I'm enjoying the tuba time." And then our Director of Sales and Marketing, Al Maniscalco, "Thanks for all your support, Paul." And the one, the only Andy Smith chiming in, "Paul Carlson."
The Maestro Smith.
So thank you to everybody for tuning in. If anybody has any questions, please again put them in the Facebook chat, and we'll make sure to get to those as we can. So keeping going on, we've talked about your tour, your hectic tour life, teaching at Grand Valley, but something that I think sometimes may not be known about you is how much new music you perform. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you've done multiple recitals at not only iTech, but some of the regional shows, doing entire recitals of new music for the tuba or for the tuba specifically.
Yeah, and that's kind of grown out of a couple things. First off, when you're gonna play at a regional or an iTech conference, you should probably do something cool. You should probably do something that you want to share with the community. And this is something I was lucky. I had teachers that shared the ITEA journal with me when I was in even as late middle school. I remember reading my first copy, and I was like, wow, a whole kind of magazine about tuba. And it was pretty cool to learn about. And something that I noticed was people are kind of using conferences as ways to develop the repertoire. And it's a wonderful way to showcase artistry and share playing ability with each other. But if we can use that as a way to expand our repertoire, have some new pieces written for us,
Mhm.
you know, that's a wonderful thing that moves not just the instrument but the whole art form of music forward. I think, which is pretty cool. So sometimes if there was going to be a conference and I was lucky enough to get asked to play at it, I would, you know, maybe commission some pieces to play, you know, get some either money from Grand Valley or write a grant. Actually, Buffet Crampon has chipped in on helping me, one of my composer pianists, collaborate with me before in the past. So that's all great. And the other thing, if you look at my resume, and I actually have an upcoming solo album coming out of the tuba works of Brian Sayak. Brian Sayak is a wonderful composer. He's won the American Prize twice. He has written pieces for Alarmal Sound and just a who's who and a what's what resume. He's won so many amazing competition things. And I met him when we were at Indiana, and we were both just doctoral students, getting through school, getting through life. And, you know, as many tuba players make friends with people, it's like, well, you know, this person seems kind of nice, so we would go to a concert or hang out, grab a beer afterwards or something, and you know, one beer became two, and we all know how that works. And then, well, so we were just friends, and one night we were hanging out, and he was talking about writing something, and I was like, hey man, if you write something for tuba, I'll play it. And you know, profound words, and he took me up on it, and he wrote a piece for me that was a piece for me playing tuba and him playing piano, that he was featured, one of the featured pieces on his doctoral recital at Indiana. And in working on it together, it was fascinating. And I've got to give him credit because he's an incredibly creative mind, and then also was really open to changing things. So I might say, hey, I think I see this color you're going for here, but the tuba can actually do that better in this range. So maybe we can take it down an octave. Or in this chord, if you're going to voice this way and I'm high enough, put me on the fifth or the third instead of, you know, meeting me on the root or something. And changing some octaves, changing some color things, working some things out with him was a wonderful thing. We both had such a great time working together. We thought, maybe we could do this again. And of course, our careers since IU have gone off, and we're both doing well, doing a bunch of other things, but it's always been a pleasure to work together with him. And whenever I am actually behind, he writes so much amazing music. There's a couple new pieces that I haven't heard that he's written for other instruments that I'm like, holy cow. His tunes are available at Just for Brass. So a lot of those pieces are published, and I think everything off our new album is going to be published at Just for Brass also. So if you're looking for some new tuba pieces, I would definitely check those out. And you know, it's like anything. It's wonderful to play tuba. It's wonderful to play new music on tuba, and it's even better to play new music written by or with friends.
There you go.
You know, so. And then to market, and then we would do this at tuba conferences, which was also awesome. So, and I've got unfortunately the regional conferences this spring were canceled. Yep. So I'll hopefully get to be doing some playing next spring I was planning on going to the Midwest one that Matt Hightower was going to host at University of Kentucky. And I have a half-hour recital of new music that has not been world premiered yet, that I'm really excited about sharing. A piece by my Grand Valley State University colleague, Bill Ryan, who is a giant in the new music world, and I'm looking forward to playing one of his pieces for tuba, and actually another piece by a Grand Valley alum, and then another piece by a Grand Valley alum, and one of my former euphonium students. So
very cool.
Looking forward to his name is Nico Schrader, and he's doing wonderfully as he pursues his composition career. So I and as your music, and for young students out there that might be listening, as your professional circle of friends and colleagues expands and you meet and greet more cool composers, ask them to write something. Even a 3-minute piece or a 2-minute piece is something cool, and it expands things for us. There's a number of summers ago I read Harvey Phillips' autobiography, Mr. Tuba, and he said he had almost no regrets over his legendary career, but something he did regret is he did not commission Stravinsky to write a tuba concerto. And he talks about he was in New York, and he's having martinis with Stravinsky and Mr. Stravinsky's wife, and he casually asked him, Mr. Stravinsky, how much would it cost? Not to be rude, but like, what are we looking at to get a tuba concerto commissioned by Igor Stravinsky? And Mr. Stravinsky wrote a number on a napkin, and it was considerably higher than Mr. Phillips was capable at the time. But especially with commissioning now, I've been part of a couple different commissioning projects and things, and there's ways to crowdsource money to make things happen now, which is also very cool. And I've come across a number of new pieces and had at least been part of at least bringing one new piece into the tuba repertoire during this time. So I'm excited when we can, and obviously solo performances can happen a little easier, but the level of recitals and new repertoire that's going to come out of this time is also kind of exciting. So we've got to make our lemonade where we can. So.
Yeah. Well, and what I think is so funny about the tuba world is that even though we are so young, there are still so many staples that we have already had become a part of our repertoire. Everybody knows what it's like to prepare the Vaughan Williams and the Broughton or the Three Miniatures and all of these famous pieces. But
definitely the Hindemith.
The Hindemith, how can we leave that out? And for all of our pianists out there who are losing their minds over the idea of playing that piece. So what is the process like for somebody who has prepared all of these other pieces before? What's the process like for something that nobody has ever heard before, comparatively to something where you want to create your specific version of it? That sounds like a really, really cool opportunity. So what's your process like?
It is, and it's something, teaching at a university, I don't want my students to just listen to recordings and just make a carbon copy of that. Interpreting music is something that you really need to put some thought and effort to, etc. And that's especially interpreting something for the first time is a responsibility. Mm-hmm. But to me, it's similar to learning my orchestral repertoire. When I was, a student, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna dig into some Strauss this semester or this week or whatever, and I haven't really learned any Strauss excerpts before, and I've not played any Strauss with an orchestra yet when you're 18, 19, 20 years old. So as a tuba player, we don't get as many options. So you learn the language of that composer. You listen to and I learned a lot about playing Strauss excerpts from listening to Strauss art songs or even Strauss keyboard works, in addition to all the tone poems and all the big orchestral things. But you learn as much as you can. And so if a composer's written other things, listen to their music for other things. Actually, one of the pieces on my on this album that's coming out with Brian Sayak, he wrote a piece for flute, and I said, hey, I bet you can take that down 2 octaves and it'll sound great on tuba. And he goes, oh, cool. And then I had to practice it, and it was really hard. I listened to the flute version a lot, and what did they do with it that was cool, and what can I do to make it my own? And that's really, I think learning a new piece of music is really similar to almost learning any piece of music. Are you going to make it your own? Are you going to interpret it and share it in performance in a way that is going to be worthwhile and something. You know, are people going to walk out of that performance and be like, man, I just got to experience that and it was cool, you know?
That's fantastic. And again, for somebody who's going out of their way to commission new works for an instrument whose entire body of work is still so small and so young, I thank you for that. And it's really cool that you get to be a part of those different, you know, musical journeys and different ways of expressing yourself.
One more thing on that too is when I was reading Harvey's book, and really as anybody studies the tuba repertoire, Harvey Phillips personally commissioned so much of our solo repertoire. And in the book, he said he's confident he's personally commissioned, and it's notated somewhere, but there's a list. But he's personally commissioned over 200 pieces for tuba. And to me, I read that and I thought to myself, well, I'll never be able to do that. I mean, it's just too much money. It's too crazy, like, you know, and that's bizarre. But I thought, well, what if I did a 10th of that? And I'm like, well, geez, Louise, it's still 20. And that's a lot. But, you know, and I was talking to a colleague of mine, and he was like, yeah, dude, but if you come up with 20 pieces that are good, that's amazing. And I'm like, well, I'm up to 8 and they're good. You know,
there you go.
You know, and just try for all of us thinking what we can do to move the instrument forward. And I highly recommend that book to any young musicians, or especially tuba players or brass players, but any young musician, because Harvey was never thinking about like, well, what can I play and make money doing? He was like, what can I play and make money doing? How can I like further that? How can I move all of brass playing forward? How can I move all of music forward? How could I develop a repertoire that wasn't there? You know, tuba is so incredibly young. I mean, the Hindemith in 54, the Vaughan Williams, and you know, shortly after that. And we have such a young solo repertoire, but man, when one person can do 200 pieces, if that guy if Harvey Phillips can make that big of a change, if I make a very small contribution, we're all still moving forward, and that's a pretty cool thing.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. And again, I thank you for that as a tuba player myself. So actually another question coming in from Nathan Hayes, and this is an interesting one. What was it like designing the 3450 with Meinl Weston?
I didn't. Nathan Hayes is actually one of my incoming students this year at Grand Valley. So we've talked about different tubas at different points. I've not worked on designing any tubas with Buffet Group, because really you've got, and this is not to just plug Buffet Group, but I mean, you literally have a who's who with this company of who's designed great horns. I mean, this PT16 was designed by Dan Parentoni and Bob Tucci. I mean, what a dream team of players and teachers and artists to design a horn, and it's still a wonderful thing. The Meinl Weston 2145 was mostly designed by Sam Palafian. You know, what a huge impact. Anybody who hasn't heard every Empire Brass recording at least 4 times is missing out. I mean, every note is so wonderful. The style, the elegance, the excitement, the energy. Sam had such wonderful time. I mean, you know, etc. So, I mean, here's a tuba designed by Sam Palafian. The Besson 983 was designed by Pat Sheridan. I mean, I've got all these incredibly bright, wonderful people who are amazing musicians and just so much experience, and they're all smart and brilliant at what they do. Why do I need to design a tuba? I'm lucky enough to just pick up what they made and be like, oh yeah, it does work great, you know? And so, you know, I'm not saying we shouldn't design new tubas, but man, what a legacy of all these wonderful instruments that play easily and play well. And, you know, the response, the color, the intonation. Yeah. So I used to think about that when I was younger, like if I could design a tuba, what would it be like? And now I'm like, what would anything be really that much better? Maybe, but probably not. I mean, these tubas are well made and designed by the best of the biz.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. And Nathan, a little bit earlier in the conversation, we talked about that idea of an all-around C tuba, and I think that you will definitely find that in the 3450 as something that is good both for quintet playing or small solo playing and in all of these different facets. So I encourage you to check that out, and for sure, if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out, and we'll be able to help you out. So yeah, I kind of knew the answer to that one, but I figured we'd be able to dive into it a little bit. We were talking a little bit about, right before we hopped on, about what it's like to play a BNS and what goes into that. And I thought that you articulated that perfectly. So would you mind going into that a little bit more again?
Yeah, we're talking about some different brands of tubas and different things, and I think that something that makes a BNS tuba wonderful to play is that the instrument kind of has slots, and really every tuba kind of has slots where if you blow and buzz a certain way, this note's going to come out. Your air speeds this speed, this note will come out. And some tubas kind of give you a wide range where you could easily lip a note up and down, etc. And most of the BNS tubas do as well to a certain extent. But what's special to me about a BNS tuba is that each one of them really, every note on the tuba really has a place that it really lives. So when you find the buzz and the air speed that fit that slot, that's where the instrument's really going to resonate a lot. And really not just resonate volume wise, but also really create a timbre that you're going to have a lot of control on. So if you want a little more highs, you want some bright, you want a little darker sound, a little more oomph, you can do that, but you have to do all of that within this slot. And that's something, my very first F tuba when I was an undergrad was a PT-10, one of the old PT-10s, and it was a wonderful tuba. And I started taking lessons with Dan Parentoni when I was still an undergrad at University of Illinois. My teacher at University of Illinois was Mickey Moore, who was also a Parentoni student. So I was like, can I go get lessons with Parentoni? And he was like, of course you can study with my teacher. Like, great. So, and there was something especially F tuba, but also then when I got my PT6, was just finding kind of the slots, and similar to when, if anybody out there goes to, when we get to go back to Midwest, and who knows if TMEA is going to happen and things, but when we get a chance to try a bunch of tubas together, spend some time with the 3098 or the Mr. PC or any of the F tubas, etc. And even the piston valve tubas have this slot. And the good thing is that slot's not moving. So you practice these slots and really learn how to play the tuba. When you pick it up tomorrow, the slots will be in the same spot. And that's, something that to me as a professional tuba player, I need to pick up my instrument and know this is exactly where this is going to be. And that's really helped me a lot. And really what makes playing these instruments really well is as I kind of know, okay, I know where these slots are. Here we are on that. So,
and that's articulated beautifully. And then, there's you go to different people's master classes or warm-ups, and they talk about in some certain situations, waking up every day and your first warm-up is almost like reteaching yourself to play the instrument, making sure that all of your fundamentals are where they need to be. And so, from a being able to pick up a tuba aspect and knowing that those slots are exactly where you need them to be is really cool. And again, the way you articulate that is fantastic.
And especially when I start my day playing and I'm picking up a BNS tuba first thing, which is usually my PT6. It's my big horn, which you can see kind of doesn't fit on the string. It's a large C tuba, but I usually play it first. And because I know my mental muscle memory knows where these slots are and knows how the instrument works, the warm-up to me is more about checking in with my body and my breathing and making sure I physically am doing everything so that I'm putting the right information into the tuba. Because when you put the right information into a tuba, what's coming out the bell is going to sound awesome. As soon as you put kind of information in, what comes out of the bell is So that's that. Because and thinking about this really evenly, and also not to go I'm talking more about Harvey Phillips than I usually do, but there's a wonderful.
You can. I don't think you can ever talk too much about him.
You can't. But John Stevens did this great interview with Harvey Phillips way back in the day on some it was like a public access, public TV kind of situation. You know, a grant through University of Wisconsin Madison way back whenever, and Harvey talked about playing the tube, like the keyboard sounds so even, and when you play a note on the piano, you're just like, boop, that's the note on the piano, and they don't have to think about evenness of sound and pitch. Whereas playing tuba, that's a huge part of what we're working on: the response, the sound, the pitch, etc. And to me, these slots on a B&S tuba make that much more consistent and a really, again, a great tool for the performer. So, you know, and the great thing about it is, to me, is we all know, if you're playing where that slot is and it's out of tune, then you got to move a slide. That's what you got to do. So, and sometimes that's just resetting up your instrument. You know, if my PT6 is set up for my playing, if I gave it to one of my students or another professional, they probably want and need to move some slides around to get it set up for them. So and that's something I see at conferences. I see a lot of people pick up a horn at Midwest, play it for 30 seconds, and I don't know about that. And I'm like, well, take a little bit of time and see if you need to set some things up. You know, if you're moving that, everyone's first valve slide's almost always going to be in the right spot. If somebody's pushed the main tuning slide in all the way, yeah, that tuba's going to play weird, you know. So take some time to set it up, and then it just works, or at least easier.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And so going forward, what's on the horizon for you? You know, I know that school starting for everybody else is kind of a big toss-up at the moment, but you know, like you said, you mentioned before, you have a new solo CD coming out, which I'm very much so looking forward to. And what other cool projects do you have on the horizon?
Yeah, so this solo album is a collaboration with Dr. Brian Sayak. Again, he's written the entire piece. We've got 5 tuba solos on that. It's about an hour of music. It's going to be some wonderful music. It's pretty intense. Even I kind of need to sit down and chill out just to listen. It's awesome. That's coming out on Potenza Records pretty soon. The title track and the name of the album is called Mountain Song, which was actually the first piece that we played together at that doctoral recital I was talking about. That's coming out soon. I don't know exactly when, but in the next month or so, that should be out, and also get it on all the streaming services as well, so people can be checking that out. Starting the school year is a little more serious thing than usual this year, just a lot of protocols, etc. And so, kind of planning different studio events, studio classes, etc. for my studio, what we kind of can and can't do, and etc. I'm going to probably do some sort of virtual recital where I'll probably be playing in the hall and just live streaming that at some point this semester, which I haven't locked down a date for that yet, but or a repertoire, but a project is always good to take on. And the nice thing is I get older and I've done a bunch of solo recitals. It doesn't take as long to learn them as it used to, but I learn them pretty fast, and then I have some time to live with the pieces, which is also really a great part of the process. So doing those things, I think it's going to be a busy school year, just from the fact that I think if anybody's watching this that was teaching lessons online, I think they would agree you have to work really hard to get the same results. So if students are going to get as much out of seeing me talk to them at a screen this way, I'm going to have to really bring a lot of things to the table, and listening is a lot harder to do over a computer, even if you have headphones and a great sound setup. It's a lot more challenging than if you're sitting right next to someone and you can see how they're physically playing and you can hear them right away. So I'm looking forward to in-person lessons, which my university is preparing for this fall, from that end. But, you know, just doing a number of things that we will be doing online, I think will be a lot more work. And, you know, and also I think all artists are kind of thinking about what are we going to be doing when we hit the ground running in 2021. At some point in 2021, things will start getting better. I'm optimistic about vaccine possibilities. And, you know, when Dallas Brass starts playing concerts again, what are we going to play? What are we going to do? What new skills can I be bringing to the table for that? So, you know, it's in a lot of ways disheartening for all of us when, you know, you don't have a bunch of things planned that you originally had planned, but it's, you know, we know things are going to come back and we're going to play and perform again. So what can we be doing there? So, yeah.
Well, keep yourself as busy as possible.
You know, I've heard a lot of friends and colleagues have talked about new books they're coming out with, or new pieces they're writing, or collections of etudes, and I have not been that productive yet, but it's there. I mean, you could always start doing that too. But I've been busy, you know, just trying to teach more online, making myself more available.
I saw Dallas Brass posted some things about you and some of the other members doing online lessons. That's fantastic, and that's really, you know, that's really great.
At the time, I was kind of like, sure, I'll teach whatever. And it's been really cool to reconnect with students that I've met from playing concerts. And, you know, and I'm not charging very much for that if students are interested in that. And to me, the big thing about taking private students is if they're really into it, I'm into it. And if they're kind of like, it's a chore and it's not very fun, and I don't need it, you know, I don't need to do that as much. But, you know, that's been a cool thing, and especially being in Dallas Brass for the last decade, it's been great because I do know a lot of students, and some of them are in college now, and some of them are doing different things. But kind of keeping track, or hearing from students that I've met from different concerts is always really sweet. So, yeah, it's been fun to kind of just be available for students, because I think it's going to be a hard time to be a student at any level right now.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you know, me or anybody else can get some lessons available, it's kind of a cool thing. And it's fun.
Yep. Well, and that's fantastic. And I'm glad to hear you've gotten a lot of people coming in and absorbing all that fantastic knowledge you have. So it looks like we're coming up right on the hour. So thank you everybody for tuning in so far. I hope that you've enjoyed this as much as I have. Paul, thank you so much, man. I truly appreciate having you here, having you share all the knowledge you have, and having you talk about all the different tubas you have as well. I was very much so looking forward to seeing you at some of these regional conferences, and I am crossing my fingers that they can get those rescheduled as soon as possible, so we can pick out a time to hang out and sit down and have a nice cold one. So thank you so much for being here, man. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So thank you again.
If I could have a quick shout out, I wanted to mention Dallas Brass. Our founder, Michael Levine, is another project that Dallas Brass is involved with too, called Harmony Bridge, which used to be a big, huge program, etc., where you bought this program and had all these charts available. But he's making the charts available now, especially as people need smaller ensemble things, especially with flexible instrumentation. I think the Harmony Bridge charts are a great answer to that. They're available at harmonybridge.net.
Fantastic. So please, everybody, check that out, and we'll make sure to plug that into the comment section as well, so everybody has a nice link to find. So again, thank you so much, Paul. I really appreciate it, and I hope I get to see you soon, man.
Yeah, you too, Declan. Thank you, man.
Thank you. So goodbye, everybody. Make sure you tune in next Thursday, I should say, at 2 p.m. Eastern time for another installment of the Hashtag Together at Home with Paula Corley and our Woodwind product specialist, Matt Vance. So thank you, everybody. Have a nice day.